Good morning, and thank you for having me. So as the very generous introduction said, I'm Ben Gesing, project manager at DHL Trend Research, based at our Innovation Center in Germany. And so today I want to tell you a little bit about what digital transformation means for us and our customers, and I'll go into 3 specific technology topics that we're really looking into at the company. But before I get started, I wanted to talk about why it's a great time to be here in Latin America, especially in digital. A few things. So Latin America is actually one of the fastest growing IT markets through 2021 with a compound annual growth rate of over 5%. 3 of the top 10 countries that have the highest internet consumption in the world are actually here in Latin America. And those 3 countries, not surprisingly, are actually the highest users of social media as well. If we look at smartphone subscriptions, they're about to grow to 450 million. Today they're around 200, so we can expect a lot of growth in smartphones. And finally, where it gets interesting for us, when we think about e-commerce, so e-commerce is scheduled to grow about 20% year on year through the next few years. And so what's interesting here is that actually today only represents about 2.5% of retail, and so we think there's going to be a big boom in e-commerce. All of this put together, I think that Latin America is a very digital, savvy market basically waiting to explode, and we're excited to be here to help drive that. But for us in supply chain and logistics, digital transformation presents the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge since globalization. Does anyone know this picture behind me? What this is? Singles Day. Yeah, someone here in the front said it. So yeah, this is Alibaba. What they created with Singles Day, November 11th, 2017, is also coming up. Some of the numbers behind this. So they've been around for about 18 years, and they're the most valuable retailer with operations in over 200 countries. In the first hour of Singles Day last year, they made $8.6 billion in 1 hour. The other thing too is that it took them 12 minutes to deliver the first order out of 812 million that day. So there's a lot happening in e-commerce, and it's something that we as an industry need to pay attention to. The other thing too is another thing that we're facing as a company is that the digital opportunities are really being recognized by startups in the market. So as DHL, we've always been one of the biggest integrators in the world, and having this end-to-end bundle of solutions. But what we see here with these companies is that they're unbundling our value chain bit by bit. And so our attitude is we need to disrupt ourselves before we become disrupted. The other thing again, so if we look at all the digital transformation that's happening, there's still a long way to go for us. If we look at airway bills, 48% are still on paper. We love all these videos of robotics in warehouses and all this, but actually 80% are still very manual. And in the United States, as one example, we have over 500,000 trucking companies, most of which are one truck, one driver. And so there's a heterogeneous nature of the industry that no startups are immune to, we're not immune to, but we need to work through. How are we working through that? So at DHL, we have I think 4 pillars of digitalization. So the first is, can we explore new business models? We do that with, we have a platform for road freight called Saludo, which is a completely new business model for us. Another one is we're deploying a lot of collaborative robotics to increase operational efficiency. And also new technologies are giving us the opportunity to interact with customers in a new way. Things like Amazon Alexa and the skills we can teach her really enhance the customer experience. And finally, I think the unsung hero of digital transformation is really culture and capabilities. It's sort of an infinite game, and it's really about evolving the mindset of the people, not just throwing new technology everywhere. But so we as a trend research organization, we look into trends and what do they mean for logistics. And there's really 4 major areas we look into. And that's megatrends, so things like the rise of the mobile internet, on-demand, urbanization, population demographics. There's micro-trends in startups. So very often we'll find a small startup that has great technology, but maybe not a huge customer base, and we'll match them with our scale and our customer base to see what we can do together. We do partner with industry experts and research institutions, but I think the most important thing is our customers. So at our 3 innovation centers worldwide, in Chicago, in Singapore, and Germany, we have over 12,000 visitors every single day, where we're validating our research testing new technologies, trialing it with them to understand what's interesting to them and how we can solve their problems. And so I think these customers are probably the most important part of any innovation agenda. The output of this work is every 2 years we publish called our logistics trend. This came out in 2018. It's in its 4th edition now. And this gives us sort of a compass on a 5 to 10 year horizon to look at technology trends as well as social and business trends that are going to be high impact for the logistics industry. But we're not just a research house. Whoops. How do we really go from research really to driving innovation? So our trend radar is sort of our jumping off point where we explore new trends. From there, we'll do a deep dive report on certain topics. This year, a couple ones that were on everyone's mind were artificial intelligence and blockchain, so we published those. We then use our innovation center as a physical place to meet with customers and validate the concepts and technologies and things that were talked about in our trend reports. And if we see that there's a lot of demand and interest from the business and from our customers, we'll do a proof of concept of a certain technology in a single site. If that goes well, and we have very specific ways we measure that, we then scale it up throughout the business. Today, I want to talk about 3 topics specifically. I'll start with kind of the most nebulous to the most concrete of what we're doing. So that'll be artificial intelligence, robotics and automation, and the Internet of Things. So we'll start with AI. So how many of you guys are familiar with AI? So raise your hand, have you heard of AI? If you are evaluating AI? If you're already using AI? All right, a couple hands, good. And how many of you say AI is not a priority? Okay, 1 person in the front, otherwise. That's good. That's really good. So the way we define AI is we consider it human intelligence exhibited by machines. It's really the computer science of automating intelligent behaviors that up till now we've only thought were possible by humans. It's fundamentally a prediction technology. And I don't want to go into all the different intricacies of what that means. But just understand this is, I'll give you an easier way to think about it. So why is AI interesting now? Because cheap really changes everything. If we look at technologies before it, AI is going to be subject to the same economic principles of its precedents. So if you think about the 1980s, the relational database made organizing, storing, and retrieving information cheap. It went into defining all business architecture today. And if you think about information we have now, it's all stored in rows and columns. If we think about the World Wide Web in 1994, when Netscape came about, it made communication extremely cheap. We used it everywhere. It gave the advent of email, and the world became a lot smaller. Google also was born during that time. I think all of us have used Google today, either maps or we search for something, right? And so when it becomes cheap, we use it everywhere. And if we look at today, artificial intelligence is the exact same thing. It's made prediction, translation, identification much cheaper, and it's going to start showing up in places that we may not ever have expected. For us in logistics, we think it's really going to do 3 things. It's going to make our operations really learn to see, think, and become autonomous. If we think about computer vision and artificial intelligence, it's going to allow us to see and understand the world and operate it in new ways. With machine learning, our networks will become more predictive and self-learn. And a lot of things we do manually will start to become autonomous. And it'll help upskill our people and support workflows and improve operational efficiency. So, talking about computer vision, behind me you'll see this video. So in our industry, weight and volume of shipments is extremely critical. And we're able to, with a single image, take a picture of a piece of freight, understand its size, its dimensions, in a much shorter period of time and much higher accuracy than ever before. And this is all just with a camera. Whoops, going a bit fast here. Okay. So another thing, so we operate over 250 aircraft in the world, even more with some of our air freight forwarding business, and air delays are an extremely costly problem. Most of our service quality is often predicated on how well we respond to problems and how well we deal with them. But a couple of our folks in our forwarding business in Asia Pacific wanted to get out ahead of the problem. And so we have a data science team in Singapore that basically developed a machine learning model using about a data set of 300,000 lines of information. Little side note, of those 300,000 lines of data, only 34 were complete. So when you're doing an analytics project, understand data quality is one of the hardest parts. But they were able to clean that up, and they actually used about 100,000 lines of information to make a prediction. And the goal was to see, can we predict up to a week in advance if there's going to be a delay between, I think it was Shanghai and Amsterdam, or Shanghai and Frankfurt. And what they were able to do is they were able to evaluate 58 factors in real time to see, would there be a delay? And if there is, can we mitigate it proactively? They were able to tell things like if it was what week of the year, what day of the week, and what airline carrier is going to be delayed. So things like if it's flying on Sunday, it's going to have a delay. If it's flying in these weeks before peak, it's going to have a delay. The interesting thing was trusted brands like Singapore Airlines actually had more delays than lesser trusted brands like China Eastern. So this is really giving us meaningful information on how we plan our air networks. The other thing is, so autonomy is something that many people don't think of as an AI problem, but if you think about an autonomous vehicle, it's constantly sensing its environment, taking information, and making a prediction on what it should do next. What you're seeing behind me is our street scooter. This is an electric vehicle that's actually manufactured, built, and distributed by Deutsche Post DHL Group. And you're actually seeing a full and semi-autonomous version that we're testing in closed circuits. So what this does is it has a follow me mode that when a delivery person takes multiple shipments and walks through an urban area, you'll see that actually the car is following him to the different pickup and drop-off points. So what this means is that we're saving our delivery folks the trouble of parking someplace, walking through a district, and then having to walk back to where the car is parked. And this is something that we're developing in-house together with NVIDIA. And for now, it's still in closed circuits, but we're thinking of eventually, of course, bringing this to public roads. So another area that we're looking into quite heavily is robotics and automation. And when I talk about robotics and automation, I'm not talking about industrial robotics. I'm not talking about these very expensive, high-footprint industrial robotic arms. We're really talking about collaborative robotics. These are robots that have been designed to work around humans, that can sense and respond to their environment dynamically. They're typically movable and not hard programmed, and they're trained. They're not necessarily, you don't need specific hard technical skills to operate these. And of course what this means is that they're made with much simpler components, much better algorithms, and they're much lower cost to operate than traditional robots. Again, I shared the statistic, 80% of warehouses are operated manually today, so the opportunity for collaborative robots is huge. And that's why we see that the growth of logistics robots is forecasted at about 31.3 billion through 2020. But let's go a bit fast here. These are some of the use cases where we see ability to deploy robotics and logistics. So we're doing a lot of things with flexible conveying, where we have cellular conveying there on the left. Collaborative piece picking. So this is, again, there's a company called Rethink Robotics, which recently merged with another, but that's a different story, where we're using flexible robots to automate very low-level repetitive tasks, as we're also facing a labor shortage. And also, we look at, I'll go more deeply into autonomous transport and automated order picking as well, where we're using semi-autonomous or fully autonomous vehicles inside the four walls of our distribution centers. So order picking, for those of you who are familiar with supply chains and warehouses, order picking is probably the most labor-intensive and core processes we have. So this is a lot of walking through a warehouse. And what you see here is a robot called the FEbot. And this is a follow-me robot that relieves our workers of the ergonomic strain of pushing and pulling heavy carts. This allows them to actually do multi-order picking, so they can pick more in the same period of time. So it's increasing productivity there. And we tried this actually in a number of our warehouses throughout Europe, the United States, and actually in Brazil. And what's interesting about this is that it senses and navigates on its own. It can avoid collisions, and we've actually now started to trial it in Germany for postal delivery. So it's actually going outside of the four walls into the, let's say, public space. Now, this is a semi-autonomous function, basically we're following, but some really exciting stuff happening with full autonomy, which I'll show you guys in a video right now. So what you saw there is an example of what's called point-to-point handling. So we have a lot of very repetitive routes that we drive with either a forklift driver or someone has to walk and drag things. And so what this is doing is this is saving that very repetitive task and actually saving our workers 32 kilometers of walking per day. This is something that we trialed at one site in the Netherlands, as you guys saw, but then there's many, many other use cases we're exploring, whether it's automating pallet handling in some of our air freight locations. The beauty of these is, again, these can work side by side with humans in regular operations today, so we don't have to redesign very much. You saw it's very easy to program where these robots go and how they operate. And again, this is introducing new technology and really upskilling our workers. Now that the range of material handling equipment that they're being exposed to is not your traditional scanners, forklifts, and all that. They're really learning how to deploy, program, and manage robots. Another one that's really important to us too, so getting into my last topic for today, is the Internet of Things. So we think of the internet typically as a networking of computers to computers, but in recent years, many of you probably heard, that internet connectivity is extending to many more kinds of objects than traditional computers. And what this is allowing us to do is really gives us the opportunity to localize, monitor, and track pretty much anything that we really want. And the opportunity is tremendous. So if you look at the technology, Frost and Sullivan says by 2020, 40% of data will come from connected sensors. There's all kinds of numbers about how many billions of things will be connected to the internet by 2020. I think the numbers are less important, but it's more the direction that's important to know is lots of things will be harvesting data and sending it up to the cloud. The value, is quite large. So we think, anywhere from 1.7 trillion to, the other one is also, if we think of what they call the industrial internet. So if we segment it down a little bit, there's a huge GDP contribution that we expect from this. And then where the value really comes in is, what new things can we do with the information? So it's not just about connecting things. It's not just about what does it mean for the global economic picture, but what new services can we do? So things like maintenance costs through IoT get reduced quite tremendously because we have better data in real time. Savings to managing machinery for the energy industry, huge as well. When you think about logistics, so if we look at our value chain, there's everything we can do within the four walls, so managing inventory, managing assets. We're putting smart glasses on some of our workers to do picking, so that's another area where we can monitor sort of ergonomic health and safety. Out in transportation, we can monitor condition of shipments, which we're doing quite a bit of already. Fleet and asset management has completely changed with this as well. And also managing supply chain risk from an end-to-end perspective is also something we can do using lots of different information from the ground. Some newer things in experimentation happening in last mile. Last mile is still the most expensive. I think, how many times do you order something online and you don't get it delivered the first time? That second or third delivery attempt is very expensive for us. So there's things we're trying to look at how we can do that better. But IoT has been around for a long time in the logistics industry. And it starts really with the humble barcode, which is ubiquitous in what we do. It's basically a way to extract information from a physical asset. Where we've done a lot is what's called passive RFID or semi-active sensors. So RFID has been around for quite some time, and we use it a lot in what's called temperature logging, especially for healthcare and pharma. But where we're going is really to real-time tracking of shipments, especially high value, temperature, and really to sensor networks. And I'll explain what that means in just a bit. But on the left, you see our temperature logger that we've had for quite some time within the company. We use this to track healthcare shipments specifically, so temperature specific. And they were always accompanied by this very expensive RFID readers and infrastructure. So it's really not helpful to have a bunch of sensors if you don't have the infrastructure to read the information from them. But what we've done in the last year is we've moved to something called NFC. So the same technology you use for mobile payments, we've actually are using that now to track shipments. And you see not only is the form factor of the sensor itself much smaller, but we can now use it with any mobile phone. So the Android handhelds that our guys are using in the terminals can read the information. We don't have to deploy any extra hardware. It's just a mobile app. They can get the information from the shipment, and they're off and running. Now where that's going next, we also have a real-time tracker. So this is something actually you can see at our booth, where we're actually using GPS data. So this is usually built on a 2G network, and we can get real-time information on shipments, temperature, shock, tilt, and vibration. But where we're going now is to a next-generation sensor that can actually be connected with many beacons. And I have an interesting story about we're one of the only companies that can ship medical-grade narcotics to Japan for some reason. And what we do is we take one of those, the yellow sensor on the left, and basically attach up to 8 Bluetooth beacons to this for 8 different packages of narcotics. So you have a mother sensor, and you have 8 children, so to speak. What happens a lot in these networks is they'll break down the boxes or break down the pallets because it has to fit in a container somehow. And if those shipments go out of range of, let's say, the mother sensor, it senses that it's lost 2 of its children, it'll then flag an alert to say, hey, 2 shipments are missing. And of course, when it arrives in Japan, they need to know these are very controlled substances, where are they? And what this means is, so when we have this sort of mother device with lots of other beacons attached to it, there's all sorts of new use cases and things that we can track with it, not just keeping multi-piece shipments together, but some of the things you see on the screen behind me. And so that's really where we're going as a company, is more to these sensor networks and really getting more granular information about individual shipments and pallets so that hopefully we can keep our customers happy beyond just, let's say, highly controlled medical substances. How do we do all this? Where do we do all this? So the DHL Innovation Centers are really the physical, let's say, place where a lot of this happens, where we have, our sensor team sits, our robotics team sits, and where we meet with customers to understand their needs. So we have our flagship innovation center where I'm based in Germany. We have one in Singapore, and we're opening one in Chicago next year. And that's basically will be responsible for the Americas. I highly recommend, if you're interested, come see us, come talk to us. But our mission is to inspire, connect, and engage. So we want to inspire customers by visiting our innovation showroom, learning about the trends, learning about the technologies that we're working on, connect through innovation workshops, and really connect people in our ecosystem to the right companies, the right startups, the right experts, and most importantly, engage. So really driving joint proof of concepts in customer operations, in our own operations, to really shape the future of our industry. Behind me is also a list of the different topics we're working on. If any of the things I said today were interesting to you, please come talk to us or actually download these for yourself online. That's another thing. Everything we do, we publish openly and publicly. You can basically download them all for free. And so if there's any other questions or any interest, we'd like to shape the future with you together. Thank you very much for having me.